If you're deep in the woods and the forest suddenly goes completely silent, leave immediately. I don't mean quieter than normal. I mean completely dead silent. No wind, no insects, no birds, nothing. Because according to some hunters and search and rescue workers, there are moments in certain forests where every animal disappears at once, and people who ignore that warning sometimes don't come back out. One group of friends experienced that silence during a weekend hiking trip in northern Canada. At first, they thought the woods just felt strange. A few hours later, they realized something in the forest was moving around them, and whatever it was. The animals had heard it long before they did. Welcome to Tales Beyond the Flame. The story was shared online several years ago by a man describing a trip he took with 3 friends during late autumn. The area they planned to hike through was remote, but popular enough that they weren't worried about safety. There were marked trails, known campsites, even old ranger cabins scattered through certain parts of the forest. The plan was simple: 2 nights camping, then back home before the work week started. The first day felt completely normal. Cold weather, light fog moving through the trees. Nothing unusual besides the occasional distant sound of animals deeper in the woods. By evening, they reached a clearing near an old abandoned fire tower and decided to camp there overnight. The tower itself looked unstable: old wood, rusting metal stairs, sections partially collapsed from age and weather. One of the friends joked that it looked like the settings of a horror movie. At the time, everyone laughed. The first strange thing happened shortly after sunset. One of them noticed the forest had become unusually quiet. At first, nobody thought much about it. Then someone else realized they hadn't heard insects for several minutes. No birds either, just wind moving lightly through the trees. The silence felt unnatural, like the entire forest was holding its breath. One friend suggested maybe a predator was nearby: a bear, a wolf, something moving through the area. That explanation made sense at first, until the silence continued. Minutes passed, then longer. Still nothing. No distant movement. No animal sounds. Not even leaves shifting nearby. The fire suddenly felt very small compared to the darkness surrounding camp. Then they heard something from deeper in the woods. Not an animal call. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Far away at first. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Pause. Like something walking carefully through dead leaves. The group immediately went quiet, listening. The footsteps continued for almost 30 seconds before stopping completely. Nobody saw anything between the trees. One friend shouted into the darkness, asking if someone was out there. No response. Then, several seconds later, a single footstep answered from much closer. That changed the mood instantly. The group stayed near the fire for the next hour, listening carefully. Every now and then they thought they heard movement somewhere beyond the clearing, always circling, never approaching directly. Then one of them noticed something else. The forest still hadn't made a single natural sound since sunset. No insects, no owls, nothing. Just silence. Around midnight, one friend decided to climb the old fire tower to look around from above the trees. The others told him it was a bad idea, but curiosity won. He used a flashlight and slowly climbed the rusting stairs into the darkness above the clearing. At first, everything seemed fine. Then, halfway up, he stopped moving. The others below asked what was wrong. For several seconds he didn't answer. Then finally he spoke, quietly. "There's someone out there." The group immediately stood. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Then he slowly pointed his flashlight toward the trees north of camp. At first they saw nothing. Then the beam passed over something pale standing between the trunks, far away, too far to identify clearly, but definitely there, a figure, motionless, watching the camp. One friend yelled toward it. No response. The flashlight beam drifted slightly away for only a second, and when it moved back, the figure was gone. The friend on the tower climbed down immediately after the figure disappeared. By the time he reached the ground, everyone felt uneasy enough that nobody wanted to joke anymore. They discussed leaving right then, but the nearest road sat several kilometers away through dense forest. And moving through unfamiliar trails at night felt dangerous, so they decided to stay until sunrise. That decision haunted them later. The silence surrounding the campsite somehow became worse after midnight. Not because anything loud happened, because nothing did. The woods remained completely dead. Every sound they made seemed unnaturally sharp against the emptiness around them. Then the footsteps returned, closer this time. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. Moving somewhere beyond the tree line surrounding camp. One friend grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the woods. Nothing. The footsteps stopped immediately. Then, from somewhere off to the left, another set began, not echoing, separate, as if more than one thing was moving out there now. That realization changed the atmosphere completely. The group stayed close together beside the fire. Nobody wanted to enter the darkness beyond the clearing anymore. Then came the sound none of them forgot. A whistle, single note, low, human, somewhere deep in the trees. The group froze instantly. Another whistle answered from much further away. Then another, different direction. The sound slowly moved around the clearing over the next several minutes. Never too close, always circling. One friend whispered that somebody had to be messing with them, but another pointed out the obvious problem. They had not seen another person anywhere near the trails all day, and none of the whistles sounded normal. The tones were slightly off, too long, too steady, like someone imitating human whistling without understanding how people naturally do it. Then one whistle came from directly behind the old fire tower, close enough that everyone spun around immediately. Nothing stood there. But the flashlight beams revealed something strange near the edge of camp. Fresh footprints, large, deep impressions in the dirt leading toward the trees. None of them matched the group's boots. And the track stopped suddenly several meters into the woods, as if whatever made them had simply vanished. That was enough. The group decided they were leaving immediately despite the darkness. They packed quickly while keeping flashlights pointed toward the forest surrounding camp. Several times they thought they saw movement deeper between the trees, tall shapes shifting behind trunks, watching. The moment they stepped onto the trail, the whistle stopped completely. Once again, the forest became silent, not normal nighttime quiet, complete silence, no wind anymore, no leaves moving, nothing. One friend later said it felt like the woods themselves were listening. They moved quickly down the trail using flashlights and GPS to stay on course. At first, everything seemed fine. Then the friend walking in the back suddenly stopped. He whispered something none of them wanted to hear. "Our footprints are already here." The group looked down. Fresh tracks covered the muddy trail ahead of them, their own boot prints, the exact same tread patterns. The problem was, they had never walked that section before. One of the friends nervously suggested maybe they accidentally looped around, but another immediately checked the GPS. The trail ahead should have been heading south, yet somehow the device now claimed they were moving north back toward the fire tower. That was impossible. Panic finally took over. The group abandoned the trail entirely and pushed through dense forest, trying to head toward the road directly. Branches tore at their jackets as they moved blindly between trees. Then suddenly, the silence broke. Every sound in the forest returned at once: wind, insects, distant birds, so abruptly it almost hurt. The group stopped immediately, and somewhere far behind them in the darkness, a whistle echoed one final time. Long, slow, almost disappointed. They reached the road shortly before sunrise and drove out without stopping. Later, one of them contacted a local ranger and described what happened near the old fire tower. According to him, the ranger became strangely serious after hearing where they camped, then asked a question that stayed with the group afterward. "Did the woods go quiet before or after you saw the figure?" When they answered, "Before," the ranger nodded slowly, then replied, "Good. That means it wasn't close yet." None of them ever returned to that section of forest, and years later, they still refuse to camp anywhere that suddenly becomes too quiet after dark.